G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. This is the second episode on the ships that are in Battlefleet Gothic. Once again, using Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2 in order to showcase these models in a lovely 3D environment where we can have a bit of a look at them. Also, I want to use this opportunity to talk a bit about the use of the original Battlefleet Gothic ships in games of Battlefleet Heresy. Now, the Remembrance's Retreat has done a lovely customized red book, much in the style of Forge World, with rules about using all of these ships. I've tried their rules, they're perfectly good for a start, so that's a recommendation right there. But the rule of thumb really is just use pretty much whatever you want. Try to avoid things like Nova Cannons, because we know they're newer technology. But treat the ships as if something like it or something similar to it probably existed in the past. Because the thing is, something like a Murder, for example, a Murder Cruiser in Chaos, been around since Millennia 33, which is 2,000 years after the Horus Heresy. But they may have been around since then, but we knew they were in huge numbers by Millennia 33. So there's probably something very similar to them existed before that. Then you've got the Carnage. Apparently the Carnage is something like Millennia 37 or Millennia 39. That came along quite late. But the Carnage and the Murder are almost identical. So, in my mind, who cares if you use a Carnage in games of Heresy Battlefleet? What's more important is how the ships are loaded out, how the ships are equipped. You can put things like Thunderhawks onto an Emperor-class battleship, for instance. We know there are Emperor battle ships going back into before the Age of Strife. The design is that old. They talk in some of the Horus Heresy books about the age of some of these ships. So the way I look at it is that it's kind of like a car model. You know, you might have a car like, hey, that's it's an Australian car here, but a Ford Falcon, or maybe a better example would be something like an F-Truck. Everyone knows a Ford F-Truck. Well, it's still called the F-Truck, but it's had that many models that have changed so much since the 1950s when I think the first F-Trucks were made. And they're still making them now. So you've got the old 1950s F-100s versus like a modern F-350s and that kind of thing. So it's essentially the same thing. It's just been updated over time, gotten bigger or bigger engines. That's the way I look at it with 30k. Is that all the ships that are used in Battlefleet Gothic, their origin is in 30k. They may look slightly different. They may have a Chaos ship's rear half, an Imperial ship's front half, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. What matters is more the core principle of what it represents, in my opinion. Now, if someone was to come along and actually really go in depth and from the ground up write a new rule set, which gets rid of 90% of existing cruisers and makes all brand new ones from scratch, they do a good job of it, I'd be all for it. But that's not really the situation we've got. Instead, people have existing miniatures. Some are Chaos ships, some are Imperial ships, some are Marine ships. And so people are like, hey, which of these do I use? Like, fuck it, use them. Just use them, Avoid the Nova Cannons, as I said. That's probably the main restriction, because they did come along so much after. Really limit the amount of them you try and put into your forces. Plus, they're also a dick weapon to use in game. It just is. Other than that, have fun with it, There's no, as we say, there's no sheep stations to be won here. Doesn't matter how good at the game you are. You're not really going to win any prizes for it. It's down to fun. And what's fun is playing with the ships you own and you want to play with, as opposed to playing with a very regimented set of, well, that ship came about in Millennia 32 as 900 years after the heresy that first appeared. No. Look, maybe my opinion on that will change if they much more regimented build a new Battlefleet Gothic game and release it as a specialist game from Games Workshop. They haven't done it. They might not do it. It really depends what they feel like doing, because Games Workshop is notorious for releasing a constant steady stream of products, we'll say. Some of which are wanted, like Adeptus Titanicus, some of which are not, like Aeronautica Imperialis. Anyway, on with the show. So right here we have the Hunter class destroyer. Now the Hunter is one of the two sort of torpedo destroyers that are available to the Astartes, because Marines actually have access to the Cobra and Falchion as well. So I guess that's technically three other destroyers in the torpedo zone. The difference between this and a Cobra, though, which it's sort of closest to, is they have the same amount of torpedoes, they have the same amount of firepower. But the Hunter is more points, it's faster, and has better armor. For those who aren't familiar with Battlefleet, the higher your armor value, that's the amount that the enemy has to beat in order to cause damage to you. So 5+ armor is a lot better than 4+. 6+ armor is way better than 4+ armor. So as an escort, it's perfectly fine. It's very fast, so it's good for getting into flanking positions to fire off those torpedoes, but overall it's very underwhelming, as I find most escorts are. They're sort of fodder for the more powerful ships. Escorts are something they've never quite got perfectly right. When it comes to Battlefleet Gothic, they always seem a bit underpowered. They just drop like flies, and I mean that would be okay if things like Ordnance wasn't so powerful. But anyway. Alright, so the next one we have here is the Gladius class frigate. So, what makes the Gladius special? Well, this is your DACA platform. So, like the Iconoclasts are for Chaos, this bad boy here is all about firing shells. This is the type of vessel that's good against, say, the Eldar, who are practically immune to Lancers, let's face it. A lot of built-in saves with hollow fields against that. It's all about these main guns up on top here. It's got 2 turrets, one on the prow, one further back, and it's just launching gigantic shells across the void out of the ships. I've always find turrets to be very underwhelming, weapons batteries that is, but the one thing it does have in excess is the turrets. And turrets are the defensive mechanism used to shoot down torpedoes and fighters, that kind of thing. So these escorts, whilst they have 4 firepower, is not anything to sniff at. I think it's much better than sort of something like the Iconoclast, which may be an equivalent. The Gladius teamed up with some cruisers, strike cruisers, battle barge, that kind of thing, and adding their 2 turrets each is massive, because that's twice the amount of defensive firepower that most regular escorts have. Now, it's probably going to get confusing when I'm like, hey, there's a turret here, but this is not the turret I'm referring to, it's a different type of turret. Yeah, well, talk to the game designers about that idea. Alright, next, the Nova class frigate. This is your lance boat. 2 firepower to the left, front, right, and of course, lance. Strong. 35 centimeters though. Means it goes a little too fast at times. Very hard to keep things in that lance arc, because you are looking at going that sort of 15 to 20 centimeters on your minimum movements. Actually 17.5. Yeah, pain in the ass. Lances are great. It's good to get them into conflict, get them into play, but yeah, I think there are better options available to you as Space Marines than even Lancers. And the better options really come in the form of the strike cruisers. Like so. So this here is, of course, a strike cruiser. Now, strike cruisers are an interesting thing, because Space Marines basically jump from light cruiser straight to battleships, or escorts to light cruisers to battleships. The strike cruiser is actually a light cruiser. Now, this is shown by the fact that it only has 6 hull points, whereas Imperial, Chaos cruisers, they're all on 8. Being a light cruiser, it means after only 3 damage is caused to you, you're crippled. So it comes very quickly, and you only have 1 shield. So I always advise taking the secondary shield. You can take a second shield, just do it. It's only 15 points, and it makes a massive difference in games. There are different variants as well. You can replace the launch bays with torpedo salvo. You can also replace the weapons batteries with port and starboard launch bays. So you can kind of keep the aircraft available to you, but you're gaining a torpedo salvo. I don't really suggest it. I think the stock loadout's pretty good on it. It's got pretty good firepower. Of course, the main firepower of note on any Space Marine ship is the bombardment cannon. Bombardment cannons in the game, normally when you roll your damage against an enemy ship to see if you hit it, if you actually do something, you're rolling it against their armor. So Space Marine ships, armor 6+. You need to roll 6s to damage them. If you've only got 2 or 3 dice you're throwing at them, that's not good odds. But Space Marine bombardment cannon only ever requires 4s. And this is also against enemy ordnance. So if they fire torpedoes at you or they're sending aircraft at you, these gigantic ass shells with massive nuclear explosions, very good at killing aircraft, funny enough. So it hits things on 4s. And when it comes to criticals, so say you do get that hit, you penetrate the enemy's armor. Well, when you roll for critical damage, normally it's on a 6 only, but with a bombardment cannon, it's on a 4. That means these things are absolutely devastating. When I played a game with my friend Leadham last night, my strike cruisers with bombardment cannons, I was using Crusade pattern strike cruisers, which have only bombardment cannons. I got 2 of them in the rear arc of his flagship, and they unloaded, and it was something like 10 hits that they fired, or 10 shots, 7 actually hit, and he just had no choice but to go for a brace for impact order. He's like, crap, I'm going to die here, so he hit the brace for impact, which gives him a save at the expense of halving all his damage output in the next phase. So he had no choice but to do that. Now my ships are dictating the pace of the battle because I can shoot him with everything I've got, and he's now on the defensive. Do not underestimate bombardment cannons. Alright, so that takes us through to the last mainline Space Marine ship, the Battle Barge. Now, there's a couple of different Battle Barge variants you can pick from. The stock standard Battle Barge, the Ultima class Battle Barge, which replaces pretty much most of its armament with bombardment cannons. Hilarious meme ship, definitely take one. And the Venerable Battle Barge. Now, the Venerable Battle Barge is a holdover from, the days of the Great Crusade and Heresy. And the idea behind the Venerable Battle Barge is that you get essentially to pick any Chaos or Imperial ship, and you pay extra points, 35 in fact, on top of the cost of that ship in order to put it into a Space Marine force, and then you've got to pay extra for any other thing that you might add, like you can take Thunderhawks for free. If it's got torpedoes, you can put in bombardment bombs for 5 points, that kind of thing. In any case, what it boils down to is you get a pick of some really, really strong, cool ships. Battle Barge, of course, bombardment cannon, bombardment cannon, bombardment cannon, and it's also got another one up the front here, although it's not modelled onto this particular one, and it usually has them on the flanks as well back here. But for the lovely model they've created in game, it's just 3 on the spine. Cool, love it. Thunderhawks as well. Space Marines obviously have the best ordnance in the game. Maybe Eldar bombers are up there. Eldar torpedoes are amazing. Because Thunderhawks actually are fighters that get a save. That's what it boils down to. If they contact other fighters or torpedoes, that kind of thing. So, Space Marine Battle Barge, definitely worth taking. It's just strange because your fleet becomes this sort of conglomeration of all these really weak strike cruisers. I mean, they're not terrible. 6+ armor all round, and 2 shields when you upgrade them. Nothing to sniff at. But you have this real divide where it feels like there should be something in the middle, where there should be cruisers, proper cruisers with 8 hull points, and grand cruisers with 10 hull points. Instead, you jump from 6 hull point light cruisers up to 12 hull point battle barges with 4 shields. It's just a massive leap. And strike cruisers like 165 points or something, going up to, the 400s, 450s for a battle barge. Yeah, it's a massive jump. It feels like there should be something in the middle, that they should have designed a regular size or grand cruiser that fits in. And again, that's where Battlefleet Heresy comes in. Adding something like a Murder, a Carnage, a Gothic, a Luna, any of these kind of ships in the middle there, it feels right. It feels good because you're giving some more diversity to the fleet. And if you do include these vessels, and they're going to be Legion ships, you pay 35 points, you put Marine crew on them. You get a higher rolling leadership for your captains. You can lose half of your launch base in order to gain access to Thunderhawks. So some really cool things available to you in Heresy. But if you're playing regular Battlefleet Gothic, load up on these battle barges. They're expensive in points. When you play a lot of those mid-tier games is where you really notice it though, because you'll rock up with, say, a battle barge, 3 or 4 strike cruisers, and the other guy will have like a battleship, 6 cruisers or something, or a grand cruiser and 6 cruisers, and it just feels like they've got the more weighty fleet. And if they're very lance heavy, like a lot of Chaos forces are, with things like Hades, Acheron, even Slaughters and Murders, it can be quite difficult for you because they sort of use their speed. They are slightly faster than you. Use their speed, they stay at range, they just pummel you with lances. Because of the long range and the column shift, you're getting not many bombardment cannon shots at them. You really need to close in, get close. So, yeah, it can be tough. And that's where Space Marine escorts come in. Whilst not being the biggest fan of escorts, if you take enough, say, Gladius escorts, for instance, pump them in around your battle barge or around your strike cruisers, use them to shoot down enemy ordnance, enemy torpedoes, that can be the game changer. Anyway, Mac with the Outer Circle, thank you all for watching. Hope I've explained a few things a little bit more in depth. Please let me know if you like this format for introducing these topics. The next one, of course, I will do will be on the Imperial fleet. So that'll be all the classic sort of Battlefleet Gothic ships everyone imagines when you say that name, with the big wedge-shaped prow like a Roman trireme. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you all next time.